Hi, all. Welcome back to the Congressional App Challenge Debugged podcast. I'm your host, Medha, and today our guest is Cori Zarek, who is the Deputy Administrator of the U.S. Digital Service. Most recently, she was at Georgetown University, where she was the Executive Director at the Beek Center for Social Impact and Innovation. Cori previously worked for the U.S. National Archives and the White House Office of Science and Technology Policy, where she was the Deputy U.S. Chief Technology Officer. In 2020, Cori co-founded the U.S. Digital Response, which matches pro bono technologists to work with government organizations to respond to urgent challenges. And in 2021, she co-founded Technologists for the Public Good, the first professional association for public interest technologists. Cori, thank you so much for joining us. How are you doing?
I'm great. Thank you so much for having me. Big fan of the Congressional App Challenge and your whole community, and excited to be talking to you today.
Well, appreciate it. And so, first, I'd love to just understand what the U.S. Digital Service is and what your role as Deputy Administrator looks like.
Sure. So the U.S. Digital Service is a team of technologists and technology enablers based out of the White House. We're about 200 or so people, and we partner up with agencies to help them implement the important policies and programs that help make our government run and that the public relies on. So, for example, one of the projects we've been working on very recently was teaming up with the IRS to launch a direct file pilot. This was the first opportunity for taxpayers to file their taxes online directly with the IRS. And that pilot just closed this tax season and went really well. In fact, one of our colleagues who led that team, Chris Given, I believe, spoke with some of the Congressional App Challenge folks at this year's event just a few weeks ago. So we partner with agencies like the IRS on projects like that, where we're able to help leverage our skills using technology and design to make sure programs get implemented well, are easy to access by the public, and work seamlessly in our lives.
That's so important. I think oftentimes a criticism of the government is that they need to get on the level of technology and where it's progressing. And so being able to see that you're dedicated to that is so incredible. And also, as a very new taxpayer myself, I am very thankful for that program and that pilot. So that's incredible to hear. I'd love to understand a little bit more about what got you first interested in working with the U.S. Digital Service, because I know that you're also a lawyer. And so how did that all come to be? How did your career journey kind of lead you here?
Yeah. So I started my career as a lawyer. Yep. I was working with journalists, working on First Amendment and freedom of information issues. It was incredible. It was exactly what I wanted to do. And then I found my way to all of the folks in government working on open government and transparency and open data, and what became really the building blocks of the civic tech movement. So I kind of stumbled into this great community and ecosystem and just was really interested in what I found to be an incredible opportunity space to take my career in a slightly different direction, learn some new things, and be able to contribute in a public service role that was really meaningful to me. So I came into the federal government at the National Archives, as you mentioned, where I was working on some government-wide policies and programs around access to information and open data and et cetera. And then I found my way over to the White House. This was during President Obama's administration. It was his second term. I joined the team in the office of the U.S. Chief Technology Officer. At the time, it was a guy named Todd Park. He was our second U.S. CTO. Todd was championing a lot of work around open data and open government, and I joined the team to help lead that. A few weeks in, President Obama's signature policy initiative, the Affordable Care Act, launched a website called healthcare.gov. You all may be a little bit familiar with this story, but 11 years ago when that site launched, it didn't go very well. In fact, on the first day, only 6 people were able to register for health coverage. The challenge there was the technologists and the tech teams were not quite equipped and hadn't been really coordinating and talking with one another to ensure that implementation of that really important policy was carried out in a way that we all had hoped for and expected. And so at the time, it was an opportunity to put our, put some work in and do our best to ensure that never happened again. And so there was a lot of energy and momentum to bring in more technologists into government and technologists who had led and delivered major uh, products and programs in other contexts to bring those skills into government. Of course, many of those people are already here, but by teaming up with the colleagues who've already been in government and bringing in some of the leading practices from the private sector and from industry, we were able to launch the U.S. Digital Service now exactly 10 years ago in 2014, and other teams, including 18F and some other great programs at GSA, and then expand that work over the past decade through the interagency. So I was sort of in the right place at the right time, working on open data and other things, when for all of us the opportunity to just really invest in data and technology and design as critical skills in government became so real and became something that we were able to channel our energies into. So I was proud to be out recruiting for USDS in the early months and years and helping to welcome the team members into government, kind of show them the ropes. It can be tricky to work in government, and it helps to have some Sherpas around. And then it's been great to be part of the broader ecosystem over the past decade. I've spent some time in government, I've spent some time outside of government, and it takes the whole community and ecosystem to make our work work.
That's so cool. And I think it's so important, right? Because, as we're getting cooler and cooler technology, and as technology is evolving, it's important that those people are not only in the private sector, but also in the government. So I'm curious about your time as at the White House. Um, you mentioned healthcare .gov with the Affordable Care Act. What was a project that you worked on, if you can talk about it, of course, that you're the most proud of in terms of social impact and innovation with technology?
Yeah. So as I mentioned, I got to be part of the open data work and the open data
Right.
movement. There's just a tremendous amount of activity in that space, and I see how those investments 10 plus years ago continue to pay dividends today. So
Yeah.
I'm really proud of that work and was excited to be part of it at the time. One of the things we did that was really meaningful and impactful, led by some of my colleagues, and something I got to be part of, was to bring in police chiefs and community members from all across the country to launch what became the Data Driven Justice Initiative and the Police Data Initiative, where we were targeting data that could or should be made public to help law enforcement officers be transparent and accountable to the public, to the communities where they live and govern, to ensure that we could really um, hold their practices to account, have opportunities to rebuild trust and transparency in law enforcement practices, and bring the folks who make those decisions, the actual police chiefs and their teams, together to encourage each other and kind of support each other through best practices in really leaning into being more transparent, open, accountable. That work kicked off, I think, back in maybe 2014 or 2015, and continues today. And I think is an excellent model of how you can bring together communities, people all across the country, decision makers, technologists, data experts, and policymakers to think about how we can work together and bring our various skill sets to improve not just practice and how we show up, but also the policies that underpin some of the decisions we make. And so the White House is an incredible space for convening and gathering stakeholders. And the Police Data Initiative, all of the data-driven justice work, which is led by former U.S. Chief Data Scientist DJ Patil and Lynn Overman, is a great inspiration for how we can just bring different communities and ecosystems together under that big tent and use the convening power of the White House to help us drive change.
Wow, that's incredible. And speaking of, obviously, working with all of these different types of stakeholders, right? And I know that your background, you haven't always been in government. You've worked, in several different industries and several different types of organizations. How do you think your background helped prepare you, to interact and interface with so many different stakeholders and kind of help see everyone wins and everyone's voice is heard?
It's always a team sport, right?
Right.
And all of the work we do is part of a broader ecosystem. You can take any vertical or movement, think about the kind of climate and environment work, or think about tech and civic tech, right? It is a mix of government, and within government, all sorts of different types of teams. You've got your policymakers, your lawmakers. You've also got your implementers, which are folks like us at the U.S. Digital Service. Outside of government, you've got all sorts of non-governmental organizations. You've got the types of orgs that actually are implementers themselves. You've got advocacy organizations. You've got academia.
Mm.
Lots of different levers that we can pull, and then of course industry, companies, vendors, partners carry out the work that helps us make this all real. So I think for me, like I fully understand and embrace that it takes that ecosystem and that broader community in order for us to carry out the work that we care about. And it has been important for me to be in spaces and make space for all different members of our communities to get together and bring our cross-functional skills and our various roles. We all kind of have a role to play and a job to do. And when we put them together and can complement one another, I find that we get a lot more done. And the work is a lot better. And so whether it's been, in my time at the White House and at the U.S. Digital Service, or running the Beck Center at Georgetown. Universities are also great spaces to convene and collaborate. I've done some work in other organizations and helped to create a few, including Technologists for the Public Good, the professional association you mentioned, which I also think is a great container and space to bring together all parts of our ecosystem and community. So it's important to me, just as a human, to be able to connect with other colleagues who care about the work that I do. I joke a little bit when I get asked about my hobbies. I like work is my hobby. I just keep starting new organizations and finding other people to scheme with who care about this work as well. But yeah, I think it is a lot more fun when we can all appreciate each other's contributions to the work that we all get to do together, and having different types of opportunities to connect, both through work and sometimes more socially, or outside of our many Zoom calls, is
Right.
a nice way to be able to find each other.
That's incredible. And, speaking of the US digital response and bringing people together, curious to understand, like, can you talk a little bit more about, like, what the US digital response is, right? And what motivated you to start connecting technologists to, government and public organizations?
Yeah, the story behind U.S. digital response, honestly might feel a little bit obvious. It was the beginning of the pandemic. A few of us who had been in the White House during that healthcare.gov
Right.
period just had an aha moment, kind of on the same day, and we called each other and sort of remarked like, "Oh, what happened to healthcare.gov when millions of people went to a website all at once that wasn't equipped to handle it?
Right.
That's about to happen to every government website for every social program or
Yeah.
every need everywhere, right? We were going to see a tremendous uptick of people who needed benefits and supports, whether it was food assistance or unemployment insurance or something else. They were going to need support and assistance, and they were going to all need it at once at every level of government everywhere. And so we all just had that moment where our heads kind of exploded, and then we said, wait a minute, we can do something about this. And lots of people did, right? If there's a flood, sometimes you fill up a sandbag, and when there is a crisis, you bring the skills that you have and see what you can do with them. So we quickly got together to start seeking out potential volunteers who might want to help whenever we identified an opportunity or a need. We started to vet those folks. We obviously were not going to send just anyone in to be a potential partner. We warmed up our connections with all the various government folks we knew and just said, hey, we're trying to put together some help if you need it. And it sort of slow rolled into what became US Digital Response over time. Well, very quickly, because everything moved pretty quickly during that era.
Yeah.
But it really was just a moment where we recognized a need and said to each other, let's go figure it out. And U.S. Digital Response now is a very strong non-governmental organization. It's been around for 4 years, has grown to have a few dozen staff. It has hundreds of volunteers as part of the brigade. A great way and opportunity, by the way, for folks to get introduced to the world of civic tech. USDR also does a lot of community programming. They really cultivate their community of volunteers and the ecosystem that they've built and continue to build and invest in the relationships with folks like us and our government partners. And so the org does continue to do rapid response and kind of support governments in a moment of need, because we may know there is often never enough data or technology expertise when
Right.
we want it and need it. And so there are lots of opportunities for help and assistance. And then they also partner on longer standing programs and investments around benefits and just other systems that we know need a lot of support and improvement in government. Really proud of that organization and what they've built. I was involved with it for the first few years, and then when I rejoined government service, I stepped away from their board, but very proud of what they've built, and love to watch it continue to just grow and thrive.
Yeah, I feel like it's such a good opportunity for anyone who has, a technology background that wants to put their work to better use and for the greater good. And I feel like just thinking about the projects that have been done, right? Like that are posted on the website, it's just so incredible to see how people have helped, New York City and people have helped Memphis County and things like that, just in terms of election assistance, insurance, everything. So I think it's such a cool mission. And it makes a lot of sense how it stemmed from COVID, because I remember going to government websites for the first time, and during COVID and trying to understand what's happening, right? Like I found myself on CDC's website so often, which I'm sure many Americans did. So I think that's super important to be able to bolster that infrastructure with public support. And then I want to talk about a little bit the network that you've built as well with Technologists for Public Good. What how does that support public interest technologists? What was the reasoning behind that and the mission for that? And how does it supplement and complement the other work that you do?
Yeah. Um, Thanks. Um, the field of civic technology is still fairly new, especially if we look at like the long arc of, other sectors. I'd say generously we've been at it for about 15 years.
Right.
And so that means there's still a lot of opportunity space and sometimes gaps in what we have created. We've got a pretty robust public sector community these days. There are civic tech organizations like the US Digital Service and the California Department of Technology and the Colorado Digital Service, right, at all levels of government. There are many non-governmental organizations. There are more and more academic centers and programs that are focusing on this type of work, and of course, many, many companies. But what there wasn't really was a professional association, a place to gather all these folks and to really serve as that community space, that convener, that big tent. There are plenty of professional associations, don't get me wrong, but there hadn't been one focused on the crossroads of public interest tech. Some have been squarely focused on public sector employees. You need to have a .gov in order to join. Others have been a little bit more industry driven and industry led. And so finding a space that really was focused on public service and those who directly provide it or enable and support that work was something that felt missing to a number of us. And so we put a little work in before we just got cracking. To really understand what the community and workforce needed. Let's validate, right? Like trust but verify. We thought that might be a gap and a need, but let's see, does anyone actually agree with us? And if so, what do we want to do about it collectively? So when I was at Georgetown, we did kind of a year-long study and survey. This was led by a woman named Jen Noina, who is now president of Technologists for the Public Good. So I will um, uh, save you the spoilers that what we found was, in fact, there was, demand and need and interest in such an organization. And Jen has done a fantastic job taking what was an early research project and shaping it into, a robust freestanding organization. Still early days. It's just, the first few years and it's still really standing up. But the goal is to be that home for our professional development, our needs. What we learned in those surveys, by the way, which we still do every year for TPG, is that folks are really kind of hungry for mentorship opportunities. As much as you might be able to find a course or go to a conference or take a training, getting truly mentored and coached and kind of paired up with folks in your field or in your ecosystem is a little bit harder. And so that's something that TPG has been investing in, running a really robust mentorship program. Folks are also looking for more in real life and face-to-face opportunities. That's one of the biggest findings that we saw in this year's workforce study, that people really want to see each other and meet each other. And especially for folks earlier in their career, they haven't had as much practice. And heck, all of us are a little rusty. So having more events and activities where you can meet people and kind of practice being a professional is something that TPG strives to provide as well. And really, it's about like identifying the gaps and needs that we have as workers. Like, what is it that organization can provide in order to really serve the people who power all of this civic tech work? So it's been really great to see that stand up to start to fill those gaps, and I'm eager to watch it kind of grow and evolve as the needs of our workforce also evolve.
That's incredible. It makes complete sense. I love that, you're also working on community building within the community of people that are interested in public interest technology. And so I'm curious, 5, 10 years down the road, where do you see the biggest opportunities for technology and social impact?
Yeah, I think responsibly, I, I try not to scout more than just a couple years ahead because
Of
I think it is
course,
just so hard to predict.
of course.
I imagine that this work will shift and evolve in ways that we couldn't even imagine, right? 10 years
Mhm.
ago, well, 10 years ago, I'm sure we hoped that, say, the US Digital Service, which we were just launching, was going to be as robust and successful and longstanding as it is. And so I hope for all of these organizations that have stood up and are holding such critical roles in our society. I hope for that continued growth and evolution for them. And I'll also be eager to see what the next generation of our workforce looks like and builds and creates. The stats are thrown out quite often, but we have a large number of people who lead technology work in the public sector at or nearing retirement age. And we have really still too few early career or entry level opportunities for folks to come in on these roles. I know there are a lot of great people working on it. The U.S. Digital Service is working on it, but we really, I think we'll see a major shift over the next 5 to 10 years in the actual workforce. And people are policy, people are programs,
Mhm.
people are how we get this work done. It's just us. So I think the changing dynamics of the workforce will also change the dynamics and the goals and activities that we take on as a community and certainly as government as well. So it'll be fun to be part of that.
That makes complete sense, and I'm super excited for students and young people to get involved. And so I'm curious, what sorts of opportunities exist for students or early career professionals that are interested in getting involved?
Yeah. So if folks are looking for let's start with students. If you're a current student, there are a number of great internships that you can apply for across all levels of public sector, all levels of government, including the U.S. Digital Service. We just launched our first internship program about a year and a half ago. So we've had a few interns roll through USDS. It's been really fun to get to bring students into our world. USDS tends to hire more seasoned folks who are a little farther along in their careers. And so we don't have a lot of early career folks on our direct team. And so it's been fun to work with students. So come work with us, work with any of our other colleagues who work on civic tech type work in and around governments. And internships are available throughout the federal agency and ecosystem in state governments, local governments, all of it. There are also a number of great internship programs run by some of the non-governmental organizations. Tech Talent Project hires great interns. Partnership for Public Service hires great interns. Um, the academic groups, like the Beck Center, where I came from, hire students, and not only Georgetown students, by the way. We've had a number of great students from other universities join over at Georgetown at the Beck Center. So lots of great internship programs. For students who are graduating or looking for kind of those first job or two, the U.S. Digital Corps is a relatively new kind of startup within government program out of the General Services Administration that brings in early career or just right out of school folks to partner up with agencies on really important projects and programs. Very similar to the type of work we do. In fact, a lot of us get to work together and collaborate. And so some of our projects are staffed by the US Digital Service, staffed by members of an agency, staffed by US Digital Corps fellows. So we all get to kind of collaborate and work together in some different ways. And so US Digital Corps is a great way to come into public service early on. And if direct government and public service work isn't your thing, there are loads of organizations that do offer opportunities for early career entry level folks. And honestly, we need you in companies too. I have chosen to spend a lot of my career in public interest and public sector roles, and we always partner with companies and industry, and we need really great people in those roles as well. And they're fantastic training grounds for young workers to kind of really like learn the space and learn the ropes, and then you can come join us in government.
Absolutely incredible. Well, thank you so much for taking the time to talk to us about your role, your career journey, and then also just all of the different opportunities that exist for the people listening. So thank you, Cori, for coming on. And with that, thank you all for those listening. We will see you next week for a new episode.
Thanks, Medha. Thanks, everyone.